dropped it. I was just double checking. I hope it worked. It was much worse than the shootout in the trucks or the one at the roadblock. Bullet holes were neat compared to the mess the shrapnel made. He tried to put it out of his mind. Finally, the sun rose and the family of feral hogs crossed the road. They were the only ones to use it that day. The next morning, Gunny spoke with Mark and Chaparro about the fight with the MZBs. He thought they'd done a good job, but he said he wouldn't have used so many grenades, at least not at first. You don't got to kill all of the enemy, he lectured. All you got to do is take the will to fight away from them. One grenade might have done that. We have to be careful with these because the chance that we get more is slim to none. Chaparro, I know you and Kurt are Army pukes, and you guys usually get plenty of supplies, but you need to start thinking like a Marine on the front lines where resupply is iffy at best. I get the point, Gunny, Chaparro said, obviously trying not to take the scolding personally. Gunny had a good point. They needed to treat every bean, bullet, and Band-Aid as if it was their last, Mark thought. In the afternoon, word came back from the OPs that the National Guard troops had pulled out from all of their posts along the county line. George, as soon as he heard the news, was knocking on Mark's door to get the tractor. Mark didn't argue with the man who was now much thinner than when he'd arrived. Mark wondered how much longer he could hide his illness, perhaps a while longer since almost everyone had dropped at least a little weight. Okay, George, let's hook up the trailer and find a couple of guys to go with us. Alex is already hooking it up and he can go with us. Just what I need, thought Mark. Okay, that's one, he said, trying not to let his displeasure show. Let's see if Gunny's up for a little road trip. I'll go get him, George said quickly. Before Mark could answer, George was out of the door and scurrying down the street. Mark saw that Alex had the trailer hooked up to the Ford, and he got the young man to help him put the broken rifles in the back of the truck. Where's your rifle? If you're going with us, you have to have a rifle, Mark admonished the young farming apprentice. I don't have one. George has been teaching me how to shoot some, but my dad never believed in guns before the burst. Mark saw this as an opportunity to leave Alex behind. Well, I'm sorry, but you can't go without a weapon. It's just too dangerous, and we never know what we might run into. The young man hung his head dejectedly, but he didn't say a word. Mark knew that the trip anywhere had become a real threat, a real treat. He felt a little bad for not letting Alex go, but it was a rule that everyone had to be armed outside of the subdivision. A second later, George returned with Gunny. The master farmer was carrying an old Marlin 30-30 in addition to his own rifle. Mark thought he recognized it from the roadblock on the way back from Waco. Much to Mark's chagrin, George gave the old cowboy gun to Alex, who immediately beamed. The four of them climbed into Mark's truck and headed west. The trip to the Watsons wasn't far, but it seemed to take a long time. Once they crossed the county line, it was obvious that things had changed. Some of the houses along the route had been burned. Others had windows broken and doors kicked in. There wasn't a sign of anyone living in any of the houses. Before, when they drove through, they'd see a few people, and Mark could feel the eyes of many more. Now it felt like a ghost town. Mark expected any minute to see a tumbleweed roll across the road. As he turned onto the road the Watsons lived on, he realized no one in the truck had said a word since they crossed into Bexar County. The houses he could see appeared to be undamaged, but there was still no sign of anyone. When he saw the Watsons' gate, his heart sank. The gate was ripped off of its hinges and bent. The big Suburban they'd been using to reinforce the entrance was on its side. Mark felt it would have taken a bulldozer to damage the gate and push over the truck like that. Stop the truck, Gunny ordered. Mark obeyed immediately and pulled the truck off to the side of the road 30 or 40 yards from the gravel driveway. I don't like the looks of this, the veteran continued. George, I want you and Alex to stay in the truck. Keep it running, and if there's any sign of trouble, I want you to get the hell out of here. Go back home and get Chaparro and Jim. Tell them we'll meet them at the little church we passed about a mile back. Mark and I are going to check out the house. If it's safe, we'll come back and get you. Clear? Crystal, George answered, tight-lipped. Mark looked over at Alex and noticed his face was whiter than normal. Gunny got out of the truck and Mark followed him. The pair crept toward the gate with their rifles ready and their heads down. When they got to the driveway, Mark could see no signs of bulldozer tracks, but it was obvious that there had been several vehicles making their way in and out of the place. Mark looked down toward the house. It was obscured by trees that had many round white spots on the trunks, where the bark had been blasted away. The knot in the pit of his stomach twisted into a tighter ball. The two men made their way down the driveway in 3 to 5 second rushes, one covering the other as they leapfrogged each other to the house. When they could see it, it was apparent that a major fight had taken place. Every window was broken, and the brick exterior was pockmarked with various sized fissures that could only have been caused by bullets. The two men worked their way over to the side of the house where the garage was. The big doors were open, and the door from the garage into the kitchen was swinging in the breeze. Mark made his way to the open door and quickly peeked into the house. He didn't see anything, and a moment later he and Gunny were searching the house. There was shattered glass everywhere, and several places where dark, misshapen circles stained the beige carpet. The house had clearly been ransacked, with anything of value taken. Mark wondered what could have happened. Could FEMA have come for them and they resisted? The Watsons would have taken at least a few of their attackers out, but there were no bodies. MZBs weren't likely to cart off their casualties or those of their victims. Whatever it was, it hadn't gone well for the Watsons. The two men took a quick look around the back and found nothing threatening. All of the tents and RVs were gone, as was the Watsons' Jeep. The tractor was next to the big storage shed, but the gas cap was lying on the ground next to it. The storage shed was open and it was practically empty, but the cargo containers were still locked. Nothing made sense.